The ground rumbled under Jack's boots as he swung his pick into the dark rock. The mine tunnels stretched like veins through the planet, carved by human hands and machines over decades. Jack was just one more worker, covered in dust, sweat dripping down his back as he loaded chunks of ore into a cart. It was another long shift, nothing special, until the earth began to groan. The sound was low at first, like a giant beast breathing beneath the stone. Jack froze, his lamp flickering. Then the walls shook, the ceiling cracked, and stones rained down. "Collapse!" someone shouted in the distance, but the voice was cut short by the roar of breaking rock. Jack tried to run, but the tunnel buckled. A wall of dust and falling stones swallowed everything. He stumbled, hit by debris, and the floor split beneath him. For one dizzy second, he felt weightless. Then he fell. His body slammed against slanted stone, sliding through a narrow shaft until he crashed onto cold ground. He lay there coughing, chest burning, ears ringing from the noise above. When the dust cleared, Jack opened his eyes. This was no mine shaft. The cavern around him glowed faintly blue, lit by strange crystals growing from the walls. Carvings ran across the stone, sharp lines filled with glowing patterns. He saw huge statues half buried in rubble, tall figures with alien faces, eyes shaped like slits, arms folded as if standing guard. Jack's breath caught. He had worked in mines across 2 colonies, but he had never seen anything like this. This wasn't human. It was ancient. His lamp flickered again, but it wasn't needed. The walls themselves glowed, alive with faint light that pulsed like a heartbeat. He pushed himself up, wincing from bruises. His radio was broken. No sound of his team reached him. He was alone. The tunnel above was sealed with tons of rock. Even if they tried digging, they would never reach him in time. He felt a chill. Maybe this was his grave. As he limped deeper into the cavern, the air grew strangely warm, as if the place was alive. His boots echoed against the floor, which wasn't rough stone but smooth, carved with circles and patterns. It felt like walking into a temple. At the center of the cavern stood a massive pillar, taller than 3 men, made of dark metal veined with blue light. Jack approached it slowly. The pillar hummed faintly, like a machine waiting for something. He raised his hand without thinking, touched the surface, and flinched. The metal was warm, alive. In an instant, light burst from the carvings across the chamber. The statues lit up, their eyes glowing. The pillar thrummed like a living heart. Jack stumbled back, but the floor shifted beneath him. Panels of stone moved, sliding open as if responding to his presence. A path of light appeared, leading to a raised platform. On the platform stood a throne, huge, carved from black stone and silver metal, its arms shaped like claws. Dust fell from it as if it had been waiting for this moment. Jack shook his head. "No way," he muttered. He was just a miner. He wanted to go home, drink cheap beer, and sleep, but something in the throne pulled at him. His legs felt heavy, drawn toward it against his will. Every step echoed in the chamber, and the statues seemed to watch him. He reached the platform, staring at the throne. It wasn't meant for humans. The seat was too wide, the back too tall. Strange symbols glowed on its surface. His body trembled. He didn't want this. He wanted to wake up and find it was a dream. But he was tired, his lungs still full of dust, and the seat looked solid. Maybe he could rest for a moment before finding a way out. Jack sat down. The cavern erupted. The pillar flared with blinding light, shooting beams into the statues, into the walls, into the ceiling itself. A deep voice echoed, not in his ears, but inside his head. The words were strange, but somehow he understood. The Chosen One has returned. Jack's heart raced. He gripped the arms of the throne, trying to stand, but the throne held him like iron. Symbols burned across his arms and chest, glowing faintly through his clothes. He gasped in panic. "No, I'm not. Whatever this is, I'm not your guy." The ground shook again, but this time it was not a collapse. It was a call. Far above, across the mountains and ruined cities of this world, something ancient stirred. Signals pulsed through the air, carrying a message that the stars had not heard for centuries. The last survivors of a dying alien race turned their heads toward the signal, eyes widening in shock. Their king had returned. But in the cavern below, Jack sat frozen, his hands shaking on the arms of the throne. He was just a miner. And now, without choice, he had woken a throne that belonged to a forgotten civilization. Jack sat frozen on the throne, his chest heaving, the glow still burning faintly beneath his skin. The cavern was silent except for the low hum of the machines around him. He pushed himself up, desperate to leave, but the moment he lifted from the seat, the throne shifted back into silence. The light dimmed, though not completely. The path of glowing stone stayed alive, as if marking him. Jack's legs trembled as he stumbled forward, searching for any exit, any sign of a tunnel back to the mine. He found a narrow archway at the far end of the chamber. The walls inside were smoother than anything natural, with strange marks etched across them. As Jack passed through, the symbols lit up one after another, responding to his steps like footsteps on glass. He wanted to scream, but his throat was too dry. He felt like he had walked into a machine that knew him better than he knew himself. The passage opened into another wide chamber. At the center rose a chair. No, not a chair, but another throne, this one smaller, surrounded by stone carvings shaped like kneeling figures. Unlike the first one, this looked almost inviting, its surface smoother, as if shaped by many hands. Jack stepped closer and felt the same pull again, but he resisted. He backed away, shaking his head. "Not again," he whispered to himself. "I'm not part of this." But the cavern didn't listen. The walls brightened, beams of light stretched upward, and the air shifted. Dust fell from the ceiling as if the place had been waiting for centuries. Jack shielded his eyes. He didn't sit down, but the chair still reacted to him. The ground rumbled and the ceiling cracked open like a lid. Light from the surface poured in, and with it came the sound of engines. Jack squinted, eyes wide, as ships appeared in the sky. They weren't human. They were sharp, angular, built of dark metal that glimmered with the same blue glow as the cavern. The ships descended slowly, surrounding the mountain above. Jack stumbled backward, his heart racing. He didn't know who they were, but he knew they were here because of him. A shaft opened in the floor, and a platform rose with a grinding sound. Jack had no time to hide. Figures stepped onto the platform. Tall, thin beings with pale skin stretched over sharp features, their eyes glowing faint blue. Their armor looked old, cracked with age, but still powerful. They carried staffs that pulsed with the same energy as the pillars. Jack's instincts told him to run, but he froze as every one of the aliens knelt. Their voices echoed together in a strange chant that made the chamber vibrate. He didn't understand the words, yet his mind filled with meaning. Welcome, chosen king. Jack's mouth went dry. He laughed nervously. No, you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a miner. I swing a pickaxe for credits, that's it. I'm not your king. The alien in front, taller than the rest, lifted his head. His eyes glowed brighter as he studied Jack. His voice was hoarse but heavy with authority. The throne does not choose wrongly. You sat upon it. The signal awakened. Our king has returned. Jack shook his head wildly. He pointed at himself. Look at me. I'm nobody. I don't have an army. I don't have whatever you think I am. I can't even pay off my miner's debts. The alien leader didn't move. He simply bowed lower. The others followed, their armor clinking against the stone floor. Jack backed against the wall, hands shaking. He wanted this to be some cruel joke, but deep down he felt it. The moment he touched the pillar, the moment he sat on the throne, something had changed inside him. The leader stepped forward slowly. Our people are dying. Our cities are dust. Our bloodline is broken. Only the one who awakens the throne may guide us. You are not here by chance, humans. You are here because the ancestors called you. Jack swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to deny it again, but the weight in the alien's eyes crushed his words. He remembered the statues watching him, the glow that had burned into his skin. He remembered the voice in his head. He was not their king. But the cavern, the throne, and now these desperate beings all believed he was. And no matter how much he refused, he knew there was no escaping what had already begun. They marched him out of the cavern into the cold night air. The stars above seemed sharper, brighter than before, and strange towers rose in the distance, ruins of a once great city now broken and covered in vines. The alien soldiers surrounded him, their armor glimmering faintly with the same blue veins as the throne room. Jack's boots dragged over cracked stone as he tried to understand what was happening. Every step reminded him he was not a king. He was just a miner trapped in someone else's story. The leader of the group kept glancing back at him, his glowing eyes filled with a strange mix of hope and fear. They led him through an ancient street where shattered statues loomed. Broken pillars leaned against one another like drunks trying to stand. Jack felt the weight of history pressing down. Whoever these people were, they had been powerful once. Now they looked tired, their movements slow, their weapons scarred. At the edge of the ruined city, firelight flickered from a hall that still stood. Inside, dozens of aliens gathered. Their faces turned as Jack was pushed forward. Some gasped, others fell to their knees. A child pointed at him and whispered words as Jack didn't understand, but the meaning clawed at his chest. The king has come back. Jack wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that they were wasting their hope on the wrong man. Instead, he stood frozen, the eyes of an entire race fixed on him. They weren't enemies, they weren't captors, they were survivors. The leader raised his staff and spoke, his voice echoing across the chamber. The throne has spoken. The chosen one stands before us. He carries the light of our ancestors. The hall erupted in murmurs. Some bowed, pressing their heads to the ground. Others argued, their voices sharp with doubt. Jack caught fragments through the translation device they pressed into his ear. He is small. He is weak. Not one of us. Jack finally found his voice. Listen, he said, his words shaking. I don't know what you think I did, but I'm not your king. I'm not even close. I'm just a miner. I dig holes in the ground and hope they don't collapse on me. You've made a mistake. The hall grew silent. The leader stepped closer, his tall shadow falling across Jack. His voice dropped, heavy with despair. Our mistake was waiting too long. Our cities rot. Our armies vanish. Our children starve. The throne is never wrong. If you are here, it is because fate willed it. Whether you believe or not, you are what remains. Jack's chest tightened. He saw the thin faces around him, the frail bodies of children clinging to mothers, the hollow eyes of warriors who had no more wars left to fight. These people were broken, desperate for something to cling to. And somehow he had triggered the one thing they had been waiting for. A woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. If he is the chosen, then let him prove it. Let him face the trials. The crowd murmured again, voices rising with both fear and hunger. Trials. Jack's stomach turned. He didn't like the sound of that. The leader nodded slowly, turning his gaze back to Jack. It is the way of our people. To be king, you must survive the tests of the ancients. No one else has ever returned from them alive. If you endure, there will be no doubt. Jack swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but the eyes around him left no escape. They weren't chaining him, but their belief held him tighter than any iron could. He wasn't a king, he wasn't chosen, but he could see the truth in their faces. If he refused, their last hope would die. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Jack couldn't bring himself to crush it. They brought him to a courtyard at dawn, the sky painted in red and gold. The ruins around him stretched into shadows, and in the center stood a circle of stone with strange markings carved into the ground. Alien warriors lined the edges, their faces grim. Jack stood barefoot, stripped of everything but his dust-covered clothes. He wanted to laugh at the madness of it all, but his throat was tight. This was no joke. The trials were about to begin. A massive gate groaned open. From it rolled a slab of black metal engraved with symbols. 4 aliens strained to push it into place, and when it touched the stone circle, the symbols lit with fire-blue light. The leader of the survivors raised his staff and spoke loudly so all could hear. The first trial is strength. The throne must rest in hands that can endure. Jack's stomach dropped as a weapon was revealed, an axe taller than him, its blade wide enough to split a boulder. The warriors bowed their heads, waiting for him to lift it. He stared at the thing, then at his own thin arms. He wasn't built like a soldier. He was just a miner. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some already shook their heads in doubt. Jack clenched his jaw. He remembered all those years swinging a pickaxe, moving heavy ore with aching muscles. Not the same, but enough. He walked forward, gripped the axe handle with both hands, and pulled. It didn't budge. The crowd murmured louder. His palms burned, his knees bent. He gritted his teeth, adjusted his stance, and remembered what miners did. Leverage. He shifted the weapon, rolling it onto its edge, then dragged it with his body weight. The blade screeched across the stone, but it moved. Gasps rose from the crowd. Not elegant, not powerful, but movement was enough. Jack dragged the axe upright against his shoulder, sweat pouring down his face. He wobbled, almost falling, but then he swung. clumsy, off balance, yet the blade crashed into a stone pillar, splitting it down the middle. Silence fell. The leader nodded once. He passes the first trial. The second began immediately. The ground cracked open, releasing a hiss of poisonous mist. Warriors covered their faces with masks. Jack coughed, his eyes stinging. The leader's voice thundered again. The second trial is endurance. No king can fear the breath of our world. Jack gagged, his chest burning. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. He pulled his shirt over his face and dropped low to the ground. Air clung heavy with poison, but near the floor it was thinner. He crawled, dragging himself forward while others watched, their eyes wide with surprise. A miner's trick. Bad air always rose in the shafts. Stay low, keep moving, find the draft. Minutes felt like hours, but he reached the other side where fresh air poured from vents in the stone. His lungs screamed, but he was alive. The crowd roared, some shouted in disbelief, others bowed their heads. Jack sat gasping, his body trembling. Then came the third trial. From another gate emerged a beast, four-legged, skin-plated with rough scales, eyes burning like coals. Its growl shook the courtyard. Warriors shifted nervously. The leader announced, "The third trial is command. A king must rule more than men. He must tame the wild." The beast charged. Jack had no weapon but a broken staff tossed at his feet. He snatched it up, his instincts screaming to run, but instead he planted his feet. When the monster lunged, he jabbed the staff into the ground, wedging it between the stones. The beast struck, smashing its head into the pole, stunning itself. Dust flew. Jack shouted, not words he understood, just raw sound. He swung his arms wide, making himself larger, louder, refusing to back away. The beast blinked, dazed, and for reasons Jack couldn't explain, it lowered its head. The crowd erupted in wild cries, some pounding their fists against the stone. The leader's voice shook as he raised his staff. He passes. Against all odds, he passes. Jack collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. Every muscle screamed with pain, but he was still breathing. He wanted to tell them again that he wasn't a king. But when he looked up, he saw their faces. Not of doubt now, but of belief. For the first time in years, these people looked alive, and he realized with dread that each trial pulled him deeper into a role he could no longer escape. The night after the trials, Jack sat alone in a chamber lit by firebowls. His body ached, his hands were blistered, and his lungs still burned from the poison mist. He wanted nothing more than to sleep, but the city around him pulsed with restless energy. Everywhere he walked, eyes followed him. Whispers traveled through the ruins. The king had returned. He hated the way it sounded, like a burden being lowered onto his shoulders brick by brick. The peace shattered at dawn. A deep rumble shook the streets, not from collapsing stone this time, but from engines. Jack rushed outside with the others. Across the horizon, ships appeared, sleek, dark, and armed. They weren't the same vessels that had carried the survivors. These were sharp and deadly, carrying banners painted in crimson. The aliens around Jack froze. Their faces turned pale. One word passed through the crowd like poison. Destroyers. Explosions cracked in the distance as the ships fired into the ruins. Towers crumbled into dust, and the few survivors screamed as fire swept across what little they had left. The warriors scrambled to raise their weapons, but Jack could see the truth. Their numbers were too few, their gear too old. They weren't prepared for war. The leader of the survivors turned to him, eyes blazing. "The enemy has returned. You must command us." Jack's mouth went dry. "Command you? I don't even know how your weapons work. I'm not a general. I'm not." But his voice was drowned out by another blast. A shockwave threw him against the wall. Dust rained down as warriors lifted him to his feet. The leader gripped his shoulders. "If you do not lead, we all die. They believe in you. Do not take that from them now." Jack looked around at the faces, the same people who had bowed to him, who had placed all their hope in his hands, mothers clutching children, tired soldiers gripping cracked weapons, fear in their eyes, but something else too, faith. He wanted to run, to shout the truth, but instead his heart clenched. He remembered the mines collapsing, how he and other miners had survived only by working together. No one had waited for orders. They had just acted. Maybe that was what he could give these people. He climbed onto a broken column and raised his arms. His voice cracked at first, then grew louder. "Listen to me. I don't know your war, I don't know your rules, but I know one thing. If you fight alone, you lose. If you fight together, you live. Every one of you knows how to survive. Do it now and do it side by side." The words weren't clever, not the speech of a king, but the crowd roared, voices rising in unison. Warriors rushed to their posts. Mothers carried children to hidden vaults. Workers hauled rubble to form barricades. The first wave of enemies landed, armored figures with blades of burning metal. Jack grabbed a weapon from the ground, heavy and strange in his hands. He didn't swing it well, but when one of the invaders rushed, he jabbed clumsily and sent the enemy crashing into the dust. The warriors around him cheered. His courage, even rough and human, lit a fire in them. The battle tore through the ruins. Jack fought, not like a soldier, but like a man who refused to let others fall. He tripped enemies with rubble, swung beams like clubs, and shouted until his throat bled. The aliens followed him, their fear turning into rage, their broken army fighting as one. By nightfall, the enemy ships pulled away, leaving burning wreckage behind. The city was scarred. Bodies lay in the dust, but the survivors still stood. Jack collapsed against a broken wall, blood running down his arm, his chest heaving. He felt no triumph, only exhaustion. But when he looked up, he saw the survivors staring at him, not with doubt, not with fear, but with something dangerous. They believed their king had saved them. And Jack realized with a chill that belief might matter more than truth. The ruins smelled of smoke and ash. Fires smoldered where the enemy ships had struck, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the hollow streets. Jack walked among them, his legs heavy, his body aching from battle. He had killed, he had fought, but he had not felt like a hero. He felt like a man who had stumbled through chaos and somehow survived. Yet everywhere he went, people knelt. They reached for his hands, whispered blessings, called him their savior. It made his stomach twist. That night, the council gathered in the Great Hall, a place once meant for emperors. Its roof was half collapsed, but the firelight painted the broken walls with shadows of a crown Jack had never wanted. The leader of the survivors stood and spoke in a voice that carried through the chamber. "The throne has returned. The trials were passed. The enemy was repelled. You are our king. Accept the crown." A servant carried a circlet made of dark silver, ancient and cracked, but still gleaming faintly with blue light. They held it before Jack like an offering. He stared at it, his hands curling into fists. He thought of the mines, of his simple life, of the days when the only weight he carried was a pickaxe. He thought of how easy it would be to walk away, to tell them no, to vanish into the ruins and leave their broken empire behind. But then his eyes wandered to the edge of the hall. Children huddled together, their faces thin, their eyes wide with hope. Warriors leaned on spears, their armor broken, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, yet still alive. He realized something bitter and sharp. Without him, their last spark would die. They didn't believe in themselves anymore. They believed in him. Jack spoke slowly, his voice low but steady. "I'm not your king. I'm not chosen. But I'll tell you this. Your empire is dead. Your cities are ruins. If you cling to the past, you'll die with it. If you want to live, you have to stop waiting for kings and crowns. You have to build something new." The council shifted uneasily, whispers rising. Some looked outraged, others confused. The leader narrowed his glowing eyes. "You would deny your place? You would turn from what the throne itself declared?" Jack's jaw tightened. The throne didn't swing the axe. The throne didn't crawl through poison or fight beasts or bleed in the dirt. I did. And I did it because I didn't want to watch you give up, not because I wanted power. The hall grew silent. His words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, no one knelt. They just looked at him, some with anger, some with awe, some with something like fear. The leader finally broke the silence. "Then what do you choose, Miner?" Jack looked around the hall, at the broken stones, at the weary faces, at the crown glowing faintly in the servant's hands. He stepped back from it, shaking his head. "I don't choose to be your king. I choose to be your builder. If you want me, I'll work with you. Not above you, not as a ruler, as someone who knows how to start from nothing and build again." Gasps rippled through the chamber. To reject the crown was unthinkable, but in the corner a young warrior lifted his fist and shouted, "Then we build!" The cry spread, echoing off the broken walls, carried by dozens of voices until it filled the hall. The leader of the survivors lowered his staff, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "that is what we need. Jack stood in the middle of it all, the crown still untouched, the firelight burning against his worn face. He knew he had just changed the course of an entire civilization. He had refused the throne, but he had given them something greater, a reason to rise again. Years passed, and the ruins slowly transformed. Where once broken towers leaned and fires burned, new structures rose. Simple at first, built from scavenged stone and steel, then stronger, guided by hands that worked together. Humans who came to the colony to mine soon found themselves working side by side with the aliens, teaching them tools, learning from their strange energy machines, trading sweat for survival. It was not an empire anymore. It was something new, something fragile but alive. Jack remained at the center of it all, not on a throne, but in the dirt with the builders. His clothes were always stained, his hands always rough. Children of both races followed him through the streets, calling him Father of Stone and the man who makes walls stand. He never let them call him king, though the old songs of the aliens still spoke of him that way. In truth, he wore no crown, only the same gloves he had worn in the mines. The old leader of the survivors grew frail, his glowing eyes dimming with age. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, he came to Jack with a quiet smile. "We thought we needed a king," he whispered, "but what we needed was someone who would not leave when the stones fell. That is harder than ruling." Jack had no answer, only a nod. Stories spread beyond their world. Traders carried tales of a miner who awakened an ancient throne and chose to rebuild instead of rule. Across the stars, others whispered of the human who was called king but lived like a worker. Some laughed, others dismissed it as myth, but those who visited the city saw the truth. A place where two peoples lived as one, their children running together through streets once filled with silence. Jack grew older, his hair gray, his body slower, but his eyes never lost their stubborn fire. On nights when he walked through the new city, he sometimes paused at the edge of the old cavern where it had all begun. The throne still stood, cold and silent, waiting as if for someone else to claim it. Jack would stare at it, shake his head, and walk away. He had never been its king. He had been something else, something the throne could never understand. When he finally lay down in his last years, the people gathered outside his home, silent and grieving. They did not chant about a crown. They spoke of a miner who gave them a future. They spoke of the man who carried no title but left behind a kingdom. And long after, when children of both human and alien blood asked who he had been, the answer was always the same. He was the miner who became a king by refusing to be one.